In a time where golf was nothing but a pastime, comes a man from down under who put the sport on the map for his country. With kids around the world picking up clubs before they can barely walk and talk, starting at a later age would need a natural talent that could produce 15 years of hard work and love for the sport in an ungodly 18 months. A feat that seems impossible, but one man managed to do. Our story starts in Mount Isa, Queensland, Australia, a town rich in minerals and home to one of the largest productive mines in world's history. With the daily production of zinc, lead, copper and silver, in 1955 gold would be born. His mother Toini, the daughter of a Finnish carpenter, and his father, an electrical engineer, welcomed the birth of their baby boy, Gregory John Norman. As a child, Gregory was never into golf, even though his mother played off a single-figured handicap. Instead, Greg opted for popular national sports such as rugby and Aussie rules football. But his true love was surfing, and as a youth aspired to be a professional surfer. With the love of the waves and the peaceful aspect of being alone at sea, Greg's mother found it very hard to pull her son away. In 1970, at the age of 15, Norman was asked to caddy for his mum at the Virginia Golf Club in Brisbane. It was here, whilst caddying for his mum, that he finally got the chance to understand the game of golf for what it really is. From the outside, golf may have looked like a silly hobby of putting a tiny white ball into a very small hole. But this experience made Norman understand there was so much more to this game. After this day, Greg's mum started teaching him, and with the help of Jack Nicklaus's book, Golf My Way, went from a 27 handicap to scratch in 18 months. In June 1974, at the age of 19, Norman received media attention at the Queensland Open. The Canberra Times reported that the young amateur Greg Norman was one shot off the lead after the first round. After being in the spotlight very quickly, Norman was taken on as a trainee in the Royal Queensland Golf Club Pro Shop by Charlie Earp. For his efforts, he was paid a meagre $38 a week. Despite the low wages, Norman was determined to improve, and his grueling practice sessions and natural ability were going to get him there quicker than anyone else. At a tender age of 20, Greg Norman began his career in golf as an assistant professional under the tutelage of Billy McWilliam at Beverley Park Golf Club in Sydney, New South Wales. McWilliam, who was awarded the Order of Australia Medal for his services to golf, provided Norman with the guidance and knowledge he needed to progress further in the sport. That progression started in 1976 on the Australasian Tour. In his first tournament, he had a chance to win, but was narrowly edged out coming down the final stretch. 1 week later, he entered the Queensland Open. Norman was well back of the lead entering Sunday, but shot a final round 70, 3 under par, to finish in a tie for third. In just his third tournament at the West Lakes Classic, held at the Grange Golf Club in Adelaide, South Australia, Norman upstaged his more experienced opponents to win by 5 shots, and this new boy with bleached blonde hair and tall aesthetic stature was capturing the hearts of the people early on. He pocketed 7,000 Australian dollars for his triumph, and Norman felt like the richest guy on earth. Whilst his head was floating around in space, it would soon be brought back down to earth, and reality would hit him square in the face. The following week at the Australian Open, Greg was paired with the top golfer in the world and arguably the greatest of all time. In round 1, Norman teed it up with Jack Nicklaus, and the crowds were huge. With the pressure mounting and having never seen so many people, Greg straight topped the ball 20 yards, barely making it past the women's tees. After the round, Jack knew he was nervous, but had seen enough and said, "You're a great golfer and you're going to be huge in America." With the blessing from golf's own god, Greg's journey continued into another continent. In 1977, he joined the European Tour, and it wasn't long before he made his mark. In his rookie year, he won the Martini International at the Blair Gowrie Golf Club in Scotland. That win cashed him a cheque of €4,200, and from 22 events that year, won just over €11,000, showing just how far the game has come in terms of prize money. In the next few years, he'd win 8 more times, including big wins at the French Open, the Scandinavian Open, the British Masters, and even his home country's Australian Open, as well as starting to dip his toes into the PGA Tour. He'd fully submerged into the PGA Tour in 1983 after leading the money list on the European Tour and winning 26 times on the European Tour and the Australasian Tour between 1975 and 1983. So a storm was heading west, and the PGA Tour was preparing for an invasion from the Great White Shark. The Great White was there for business, and in the deep waters of the PGA Tour was not going to leave a single stone unturned. He took centre stage, winning his first win at the Kemper Open, winning by 5 strokes, and a week later he gained worldwide prominence at the 1984 US Open. Norman holed a dramatic 45-foot putt on the 72nd hole to force a playoff with former Masters champion Fuzzy Zoeller. At the next day's 18-hole playoff, Zeller would earn a 67-75 victory over Norman. The thing with golf is that you lose 95% of the time, and getting over those losses as quick as possible will determine how many more times you win. For Norman, it was 1 month. He quickly put that defeat behind him with a victory at the Canadian Open for his second win of the year, capping off a brilliant start to his PGA lifestyle. With 2 wins again in 1985 and honestly looking like a new golden bear had been born, nobody could have predicted a season of such dominance to come. In 1986, Norman won 11 times worldwide, including 4 wins in Australia and 2 regular PGA Tour events. However, 1986 is remembered for the Norman Slam. Norman held the lead for all 4 majors through 54 holes. This meant he played in the final group for every major and had perhaps the best chance in history of winning the single-season Grand Slam. However, the only major victory Norman earned that year was the 1986 Open Championship at Turnberry. Norman shot a second round of 63 on Friday at Turnberry, tying the record for the lowest ever round at the Open. Only 15 players broke par in the second round. Tom Watson describes Norman's feat as the greatest round ever played in a tournament in which I was a competitor. Norman survived the weekend's brutal conditions at Turnberry, with a final round of 69 to win the Open by 5 shots. After being presented with the Claret Jug Trophy, Norman said, "Outside of Australia, Britain was the first place that accepted me as a professional golfer. To win my first Open in front of the British public is the greatest feeling ever." Norman's 4 wins in Australia in 1986 helped him finish at the top of the Australian Order of Merit for the 5th time. He also topped the US PGA Tour money list for the first time that year, becoming the first player in history to become number 1 on both sides of the Atlantic. Norman ended 1986 with 11 worldwide victories and was officially ranked number 1 in the brand new official World Golf Rankings. Hard to beat a season of such magnitude. Norman's dominance continued throughout the years. He had many a close calls, including the 1987 Masters. In his final round on the 18th green, Norman had a 20-foot putt for birdie that would win the tournament. The ball trickled over the left lip of the cup, missing by millimeters. After Norman's par on the 72nd hole at Augusta, he found himself in a sudden death playoff with Larry Mize and Seve Ballesteros. On the second playoff hole with Ballesteros eliminated, Mize holed a 47-yard, 140-foot chip to win the tournament. There were a lot of close calls, but it would be disrespectful to focus on them. Greg yo-yoed with the number 1 spot with Seve, and even though the majors weren't being lifted, everything else was. Norman had another 4 wins in Australia in 1988, and in the US, Norman won the MCI Heritage Golf Classic at Hilton Head Island in South Carolina. Before the event, a leukemia-stricken boy who had got his wish to meet Norman and watch him play was only supposed to watch the golfer for 2 rounds, but Norman arranged for him to stay until the tournament's completion. Norman awarded the teenager with the trophy and later that year was inducted into the Sport Australia Hall of Fame. The disappointment in majors continued into the 90s, but while 1990 was not Norman's strongest major year, he finished at the top of the PGA Tour money list for the 2nd time in his career. He also won honours of the Varden Trophy and Byron Nelson Award, and later that year won the Australian Masters in his home country for a record 6th time. After a career slump in the early 1990s, if you can really call it one, Norman turned to renowned coach Butch Harmon for help. Together, the two rebuilt Norman's game by solving mechanical problems that had crept into his swing. As a result of this, Norman earned his 2nd major at the Royal St George's in the 1993 Open Championship. There, in ideal conditions, Norman defeated a leaderboard consisting of Nick Faldo, Bernard Langer and Corey Pavin. Norman's final round 64 was the lowest score by a winner in Open history until Henrik Stenson's 63 at the 2016 Open Championship. The form continued into 1994 when Norman easily beat records for the lowest 18, 54 and 72 hole scores at the Players' Championship. After opening with a course record tying 63, he followed with 3 67s to give him a final total of 24 under par, 6 strokes better than any previous winner. His close call major run continued as Norman finished 3rd at the 1995 Masters and was the runner-up at the 1995 US Open. In June, he won his 2nd Memorial Tournament, a victory that marked the beginning of one of his best years on the PGA Tour. After his win at the Canon Greater Hartford Open, aided by a chip-in for eagle on number 14 in the final round, Norman overtook Nick Price as the number 1 golfer in the world. Later, he won the NEC World Series of Golf, holding a 70-foot birdie chip shot to defeat Billy Mayfair and Nick Price in a playoff on the first hole. He ended the year topping the money list for the third time and was named the PGA Tour Player of the Year. The following years, the Masters curse continued. Norman opens the 1996 Masters with a course record tying 63, which put him at the top of the leaderboard. He held the lead for 3 days, and Norman took a 6-stroke lead into the final round and lost the tournament to Nick Faldo by 5 strokes. Norman then won 2 tournaments in 1997, but they were his final victories on the PGA Tour. Towards the end of his career, injuries would strike in all parts of his body, forcing him out of the game. He'd make the odd appearance, but the new youth on tour never got to see prime Greg Norman, a true great and force to be reckoned with. Through his astonishing career, Norman won 88 times in his professional career, as well as 3 Arnold Palmer Awards as the tour's leading money winner in 1986, 1990 and 1995. He had 30 top 10 finishes in majors with a strike rate of 38% and was the first person in tour history to surpass $10 million in career earnings. Norman's dominance over his peers, despite his comparative lack of success in majors, was probably best expressed in his official World Golf Rankings, where he spent 331 weeks, second only behind Tiger Woods. Although only having 2 majors, the Great White came runner-up on 7 different occasions, 3 of those coming in the Masters. So to put Norman up there with the greatest of all time is quite easily decided on his trophy cabinet alone. To dominate 2 decades of golf has only been matched by Tiger Woods and Jack Nicklaus, and he definitely deserves a seat at the table. Ignoring the things in recent years and focusing only on his playing career, Greg Norman is a true great of the game and fully deserves his place in the Golf Hall of Fame.